Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Across Africa, our weekly look at stories from across the continent. I'm Georgia Calvin-Smith, and this week, rights activists in Morocco trying to penetrate a culture of silence and raise awareness about the scale of the problem of sexual and domestic abuse in the country. Half of women in one survey say that they've faced violence, but a fraction have reported anything. Also, more young Togolese farmers sign on for agroecology studies as they look for ways to increase their yields in a sustainable way. By changing the way they farm, some have seen their returns doubled. And volunteers in Zanzibar band together to save as many injured turtles as they can and nurse them back to health. Then, once a year, they return the animals to the ocean. But first, there is a pushback in Morocco against the code of silence that has traditionally surrounded sexual and domestic abuse. A recent government survey found that 50% of women had been a victim of violence. A little under a third of them said that they'd been raped. However, only a fraction had ever filed a complaint. Campaigners say that that has to change. Our correspondents report.
Breaking taboos around sexual violence against women. That's the driving mission of this production company. Their latest web series shows real victim testimonies illustrated by Moroccan artists, intended to give women's voices maximum exposure.
Ces capsules, ce sont des témoignages authentiques de femmes qui ont été victimes de viol, soit dans un cadre conjugal, parce que ça existe, c'est même très répandu, soit dans le cadre du travail.
These poignant testimonies were then interpreted by illustrators to make a series of animated short films.
La première fois où j'ai reçu l'audio, j'avais les larmes aux yeux parce que j'ai écouté tous les témoignages, j'ai écouté toute l'histoire, comment elle raconte, comment elle parlait, et on sentait la souffrance dans sa voix. Du coup, c'était très difficile de l'écouter et le réécouter pour pouvoir le mieux illustrer son histoire.
An association helped to gather the witnesses. While many were keen to be heard, very few of them agreed to go public. Bouchra was one of those who decided to speak openly.
باش كنخفف على راسي بحال شي حمل هزه كنبغي الناس بحال يتقاسموا معايا بحال كنمشي عند شي طبيب نفساني كنهضر.
Ce qu'on demande pour l'instant, c'est que la femme frappe les portes des associations, parler de ce type de violence parce qu'il est encore tabou. Ils n'osent pas de parler, ils croient que c'est normal, même s'il est forcé de faire des rapports, c'est normal, c'est la religion qui dit ça, c'est les coutumes, c'est les traditions. Et maintenant, c'est le temps de dire non, c'est le temps d'arrêter ce type de violence.
The challenge is great, but more women say they are ready to face it.
French industrial giant Bolloré has reached a settlement over a decades-old corruption case in Togo. The company's agreed to pay 12 million euros as part of the deal with financial crime prosecutors here in Paris. Shelley Sitbin has more.
Bolloré, one of France's top industrial groups managing transportation, energy and logistics, has been under investigation for years over the way it got a deal to manage the port of Lomé. The group got the contract shortly before Togolese President Faure Gnassingbé was re-elected in 2010. And during the campaign, the Togolese government used the services of communication company Havas, which is part of the Bolloré group. Investigators believe the French group may have undercharged its consultancy services to get the port deal, which Bolloré denies. Still, it negotiated plea bargains anyway with financial crime prosecutors to settle the case. The company accepted to pay 12 million euros in fines. That was approved by the court. But then, the judge threw out the other plea bargains involving billionaire Vincent Bolloré, the director general of the group, and the international director of Havas. The judge ruled that the fines of 375,000 euros were too lenient for such serious charges, which have undermined economic order and Togo's sovereignty. The judge said the group's managers should be tried, but that decision will be taken by other magistrates.
A group of young farmers in central Togo are trying to lead the way using sustainable agricultural techniques. Many have studied agroecology to update their methods. The course is becoming increasingly popular, as our correspondents report.
More and more young people like Abdu are promoting chemical-free agriculture. He's currently teaching young producers enrolled on a 3-month course about sustainable food and agriculture. That means using no chemical pesticides or fertilizers. Everything used on the land is natural. Nearly 300 student farmers have been trained thanks to farm schools like this one, which are expanding rapidly in central Togo.
What I learnt in training was so important that I couldn't keep it to myself. So the idea came to me to pass on what I learnt very quickly, to save lives and to save nature.
I would pass on what I learned to my husband, who is a farmer. It's really different from what he does. This way we will be able to meet all the needs of the family, and later I will pass on this knowledge to my children. This is an ancient agricultural practice that has been abandoned.
All the farm schools are modelled on the Albaraka Farm School in Chavadi. Everything started here with this farmer after he visited the Songhai Centre in neighbouring Benin, a reference in terms of ecological practices.
When we were young, our dads used to have good yields here, but for some time now we have noticed that the soil is getting poorer. The yields are decreasing day by day. And that is why we developed agroecology.
By changing the way they farm, their returns have doubled. Extra produce is sold to the local population.
For a year now, with the health crisis, agroecology has reassured us and shown us we can be self-sufficient. Now we can really appreciate our local initiatives to develop a sustainable agriculture without reaching out to the outside world.
Today, in this central region alone, more than 1,200 young farmers have joined the cooperative. The hope is now to attract more young farmers to adopt sustainable farming across the country to help feed the rural population.
Now, every February, environmentalists in Zanzibar celebrate an annual turtle release day. Many of the animals die because of pollution, choking on plastic or getting stuck in fishing nets. So volunteers band together to save as many as they can and nurse them back to health. Then, once a year, they return the animals to the ocean.
2, 3. Turtles are rarely quick, even when racing to the ocean. And this bunch is particularly slow. These animals have been injured and healed. The ceremony is their long-awaited release. It's organized once a year.
The small turtles we release from Kendwa Beach so that they have the opportunity to walk back into the ocean, and that way they remember where they were born, and in 20 years' time, hopefully, they come back and the whole process starts again.
One of the top threats to turtles is plastic. With their bad eyesight, turtles often swallow plastic, mistaking it for food, and eventually they die. They're also cut in fishing nets or are poached. But Zanzibar residents have been increasingly caring with the animals.
The fishermen now bring in the turtles to the aquarium, so if they are unfortunately caught in their nets, they now bring them in so that they can be nurtured back to health.
Turtles attract tourists, which means more jobs and income to local businesses. They also eat algae, which can be invasive, and they eat jellyfish, which have proliferated across the world in recent years. Whatever the reason for appreciating turtles, there are always people thrilled to bring them back into the wild.
And 5 designers with African backgrounds recently made their debut at Milan Fashion Week. Nigeria's Joy Meribe, Burundi's Fabiola Manirakazia, Morocco's Karim Daoudi, Pape Magadou Fall from Senegal, and Cameroon's Giselle Nsama make up the crew that has been dubbed the Fab Five. They're the first crop of creatives to come through a collaboration between the National Chamber of Italian Fashion and the Black Lives Matter in Italian fashion movement. So congratulations to all of them for their collections. That's it for Across Africa for now. But do take a look as we leave you with a sample of their spectacular runway shows. Take care.
Where do I start? I ask myself, how do I write this song? What do I say? Who do I speak to? And are you willing to listen? I know the month from my rent due. Got to find a way to pay my bills too. And now I'm too close to my deadline. 9 a.m. coffee, set the phone in my hand. Today is nothing new to say. Thought I had left every word on a message with you. Didn't want me to. Wasn't planning your request. 7th of May, we could be cutting down the space. Heard your version of my story, thank you next.